Welcome to As I Live and Grieve, a podcast that tells the truth about how hard this is. We're glad you joined us today. We know how hard it is to lose someone you love and how well-intentioned friends and family try so hard to comfort us. We created this podcast to provide you with comfort, knowledge, and support. We are grief advocates, not professionals, not licensed therapists. We are you.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back again to As I Live and Grieve. I hope you've all had a decent week. I hope you've taken care of yourselves, and you're ready for another fascinating episode. I might say, though, my little disclaimer, you may want to have a tissue handy, because this one could be pretty raw. But I think we all need to hear it because. So with me today is Hope Reger. Hi, Hope. Thanks for coming today.
Hello, thanks for having me. It is such my pleasure to be here.
Oh, great. Our pleasure indeed. Before we get started talking about you, your story, would you just offer a little bit of your background to our listeners?
Absolutely. I live in Ohio with my husband, Mike. I have two sons. Brian will be turning 33 this month. And then my youngest son, Justin, is forever 19, which we'll talk about. I have three beautiful granddaughters, Halen, Adeline, and Briley. They're everything to me. And we just went trick-or-treating last night for the first time, which was fabulous. And I work for a major financial institution as a full-time job. And I've been there for a little over 26 years. And that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Okay. Now, you mentioned when you talked about your children, you mentioned Justin, 19 forever. Mm-hmm. I love that phrase, and I have to confess, I've not heard it. So Justin is your loss, and this is where the rawness comes. Are you willing to share just a little bit about that loss, about Justin?
Absolutely. So in 2015, I went through a divorce with my first husband. I decided that Justin had turned 18 and my oldest son had began his life with his family. And my job had an opportunity for me to move a couple hours away in Columbus. And so as my normal son, what I mean by that is a teenage son was, very hesitant to move with mom. He was 18, didn't want to leave his hometown. And so he would play this back and forth game. Like he would stay with his friends and he would come and stay with mom. But he knew if he had to stay with mom, that meant he had to get a job, he had to work, he had to, do chores, those kind of things. So he went back and forth from 2015 to 2016. And then in September of 2016, he decided to move in with a couple roommates. So he let me know, he's like, Mom, I think this is a good thing. I'll get a stable job here in our hometown and, I'll just make it work and it'll be great. And you don't have to worry about me, which of course I was like, yeah, right. You're 19. So he lived with these two gentlemen and one was quite a bit older. I had never met them. I knew of them, but I had never face to face meet them. And so Justin, when he moved in, one of the gentlemen had already established furniture and those kind of things. So Justin didn't need any of that. So it was really, he just packed up his clothes and moved in. And so I remember one day my granddaughter had a soccer tournament and I said, Justin, would you go to breakfast with me? Just meet me for breakfast. And I missed you, I haven't seen him. And he was like, yeah, sure, Mom. And so I called the next day to go to breakfast. He never answered the phone. I ended up getting a hold of him. And he literally was like, Mom, I don't feel like going to breakfast. Can you just bring me something here, drop it off? Maybe some groceries, as a 19-year-old. So I ended up going to the grocery store, bought him some fast food, got him some pizza rolls or whatever, kids at that time. And little did I know when I pulled up that late September, was going to be the last time that I ever saw him. And he came out of the house, saw me in my car, jumped over like the rail, like you know how kids do. He was like so excited. He was like, "Thanks, Mom. This is great. I love you." Blah blah blah. You know. And I was like, "All right, I love you too." And he went back in the house and hopped over the fence or hopped over the railing, just as a goofy. He was goofy and always had a sense of humor. And so that was late in September. And then I talked to Justin every day. There was not a day that went by that he didn't call me. And if something happened where we didn't talk, I would think that something was wrong. Like he would always call me every day. And so in November, I went to the movies with a friend of mine, and Justin had called. And usually if Justin needs money or food or something's going on, he'll keep calling till I answer, right? Because, you know, as moms, we don't ever answer the phone. Like,
That's right.
You know, right. They're like, "Why do you have a phone, Mom? You never answer." So he would keep calling. And this time he didn't. And so I thought, he must have not, you know, needed me. He must have got whatever it was. And so we went to the movies, and I came home that night, and it was late, so I was like, I'm not going to call him back. And so the next morning, I heard this pounding on my door. And when I looked out, I lived in a condo at the time. There was 2 police officers standing there. And I said, what in the world has that child done? What, right? And he was, you know, like you said, fearless, right? 19, didn't have a care in the world. And I'm thinking he's gotten himself arrested for, you know, toilet paper in somebody's house or just something, you know, crazy. And he doesn't have his cell phone, so he doesn't know my number, you know, that kind of thing. Just runs through your mind, all those crazy things. And so I went down and answered the door, and they asked me if I was Justin's mom. And of course, it's like, yes. And still, I was like, this isn't like nothing horrible, right? And so they handed me a piece of paper. It was like a Post-it, and said, you need to call this name and number. And I was like, well, do you know what it's about? And they were like, no, we don't know what it's about, but you need to call it. So I was like, okay. So then I was thinking to myself, surely if it was something horrible, they would have told me, right? Because you see that in the movies, right?
Sure.
Right. So I go upstairs, and I put the note down, and I dial the number, and the person on the other line answers Greene County Coroner. And as a mother, I thought for sure, you've got the wrong number. You've got the wrong name. You've got the wrong person. And he asked me my name, and I said yes. And then he said, are you Justin's mom? And I said yes. And he said, I regret to inform you that Justin had gotten into an altercation with his roommates. It started with verbal arguing back and forth, calling names. And then it turned into physical fighting. And then Justin apparently had one of the gentlemen up against the wall. And even though Justin had no weapons, no guns, no knives, no bats, it was physically fist fighting. The gentleman pulled a gun, put it to Justin's chest, and shot. And it hit.
Oh my God.
So I'm listening to these words, right? But I'm not like understanding.
Right.
And then I start to think, and I said to him, okay, well, where's he at? This is, you know, as a mother, this is what you start thinking. Like, where's he at? I can fix this, right? I can fix this.
Right.
You know, I don't know what you're talking about. And he said, Hope, he's at the morgue. While they do the investigation, the gentleman did admit that he shot and killed Justin. He's been arrested for murder. But you have to get a hold of a funeral home to like go because of the process. So you can't see him right now.
Right.
And I was like, no, I need to see him. Like, I need to fix him, right? And he's just very apologetic and just very, you know, I'm so sorry to do this over the phone and that kind of thing. And I was, I just was like emotions, like just complete emotions, overwhelm. I talk about it now as sort of like a fog Like, it was in my face. It was like, I didn't know what to do. And then I started thinking, oh my gosh, I have to call people. And apparently this was on the news. Now, his name hadn't been mentioned because they were trying to, because this is 6:30 in the morning and this happened at 1:30 in the morning, that morning before, or that, 1:30, and this was 6:30, 5 hours later. And so it had gotten on the news, but they didn't have so I was like, I need to call and tell. So I'm calling grandparents, parents and his brother, and just overwhelming emotions, grief, like the pain of it just wasn't there yet. Like, I tell people all the time, like, when things like this happen, it's sort of like you get on autopilot and you just start functioning in a way that you've never seen yourself do. Like, when you're sick or when you're not feeling well, you're not feeling well and you just got to do what you got to do. This was this was like autopilot. I had to get to my son. And so I got in the shower and all the tears started to come then, right? Like rain. And I'm thinking to myself, how do I got to get him? And what's going through my mind is he's all alone and cold. And I could not get past that. And I was thinking, I just have to get there and take care of him and and to just fix this like all moms do, because I wasn't there to protect him from it, but now I can fix it, right? And now I know I can get there, I can fix it. And so after all the calls and after I had to drive, the hour and a half, 2 hours to get there, that's when my whole life just completely changed. And everything I'm about or was about was changed in that 5 seconds.
So you had, not only did you get this news over the phone,
mm-hmm.
You were by yourself. Did you have to make that hour and a half drive by yourself as well?
No. Now, at the time, I started dating someone. So he was there, who's now my husband. We were together about a year during that time before, we met late in 15. And then, so he was there, and then he actually, a friend of mine was there that was there. It's just an odd kind of coincidence, but she was there doing training, so she drove me back home. So I did not have to drive by myself. Thank goodness. I don't know. Even though you're on autopilot, I don't know if I could have made that drive. I don't know if it was a safe idea to make that drive. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
It's never intended, I don't believe, for us to outlive our children.
Mm-hmm.
But to lose a child in that type of devastating trauma or traumatic instance, the words escape me.
Mm-hmm.
How did you continue to function? Because you had to line up funeral home and you had to go through all of that, hearing it on the news. Mm-hmm. What were the next day or days like for you?
So, it was like a fog. Like I tell it, like maybe it's a fog. And then I also use candle wax. You know how candle wax just sort of blurs together? That's the way I felt. But I was angry, one, that nobody had told me what to expect. I was angry as hell because I felt like nobody goes through this. Nobody tells anybody, what to do, how to plan. I had no idea. I had never been involved with a funeral ever. My grandparents had passed away, but I wasn't involved with that funeral. I was there and I participated, but I was never involved. And, I got to the point where I was so angry because I was trying to take care of everybody else as the mother, right? And And then I was getting a call. I've told this, like, an organ donor. Justin wanted to be an organ donor. And he was very, very, very set on this. Because I told him, I said, are you sure you want to be an organ donor? He was like, yes. I always, like. So I got a call that night because, of course, they're in a hurry, right? From the organ donation group. And I'm thinking, first of all, what a horrible job that lady has, to call parents of children that have just passed to ask them. And they were the most personal questions that I've ever been asked. And I couldn't answer them all because I didn't know certain circumstances, whether if Justin had done any kind of drugs before then, or if he had been drinking alcohol, or if he had any kind of sickness. I mean, there were questions that I couldn't answer. So then that was a failure. Like, then I started thinking, I failed him because he couldn't be an organ donor, because I couldn't say yes or no to some of these questions. And then the funeral, planning the funeral, like, you go in there and you're like, I'm going to give my son the best, right? I mean, and they don't talk to you about this. Nobody talks about the cost. And the first people, like, they said I had to call the funeral home to get to him. So I had to call the funeral homes and I said, okay, how do I get my son? And they're like, well, you have to have $10,000. I'm like, what? I'm not purchasing a car. I'm not renting a house. What are you talking about? And of course I have retirement and I had savings, but I didn't know the time frame that it was going to take me to get this. And all I kept on panicking that it's going to take days for me to gather $10,000 to get my son to a funeral home, right? So the panic sets in. And I'm trying to, and everybody is around, and it's just, your mind is swirling. And all you want to do is just see your son. You just want to see him and touch him because he's cold and he's all alone, right? And so I got a hold of a funeral home, the third funeral home, that said, we'll take care of that, Hope. We'll figure it out. And I owe so much gratitude to that funeral home because they literally made all the arrangements to go get him. They called the very next day and said, he's here. We want you to come in. We'll do the arrangements. We'll work out the money. We'll get it figured out. Because I was like, I don't know how much time it's going to take me to get this out.
Right.
And it's okay, Hope. That's what they just kept saying. It's okay. And I owe so much to that funeral home. And they eventually, like, we had, in lieu of flowers, I had toys that I said, bring in toys as donations. And that funeral home actually took care of that process and delivered it to an orphanage as well. So they went above and beyond. But while you're in that funeral home, making the arrangements, knowing that your son is in the next room, and I talk about this, is one of the hardest. Like, I just wanted to get it over with and just, okay, that's fine. We'll do that. And then it ended up being very expensive because I wanted the best of my son.
Sure. And
I did have insurance on Justin, ironically. And so when she finally told me it was time to go see him, that I was not prepared for.
Right.
As a mother, she said, do you want to go by yourself? And I said, yes. And then I had a slew of people with me. And I said, I want to go by myself first, right? And I remember walking in, and we walked down the hall. She says, when you're ready for the other family, let us know. So I walk into this room, and at the very end of the hall is my son on like a hospital bed, completely naked, but he had a sheet over him. It's gorgeous brown hair. He had the most beautiful hair. And I just remember at that exact moment, that's when it hit me that I was not going to be able to fix it. And that I was not going to be able to take him home with me, which I think is what I had in the back of my mind. That, okay, I'll do all this stuff. I'll get all this done. But I'm going to take him home. like I fixed it, and that was probably the worst time throughout anything that I went through.
Okay. Take a breath. Let's switch gears for a minute. Somehow in all that, you found strength to turn his death, this excruciating pain, into a legacy. Tell us about Justin's legacy.
Absolutely. So a few months after Justin passed, of course, there was this trial or this indictment. And so the gentleman that shot and killed Justin was bonded out. His parents had bonded him out. And we went to the grand jury, went to the grand jury for indictment. So I don't know if you know a lot about that, but the grand jury sort of says, hey, there's evidence. We're going to indict him. Bing, bang, boom. And that's what I thought it was going to be. So I get a call from the victim advocate's office, and they're like, it's going to be delayed. It was delayed. It was delayed. It was delayed. And I was thinking, why is it delayed so long, right? But I know the court systems aren't the quickest. And so months after Justin had passed, he went to the grand jury, and they allowed him to plead self-defense, which means there would be no indictment, which means he will not have to pay for Justin's murder. So I had two choices at that moment. And I remember leaving that courthouse going, I failed him again, right? And I had so much anger and frustration and hatred. And I was mad at God. I was mad at the world. I was mad at this person. I was mad at Justin. I was mad at everybody. And I thought, I'm just going to crawl in my bed, and I'm not going to get out of bed. And you know what? Not one person would be mad about it. Not one person would say, oh, Hope, get out of bed. They wouldn't. They would let me stay there because they knew the pain that I was in. And so I realized at that moment that I had two choices, and I could either sit there and live in that negative place, or I can build something for my son's legacy that would honor him for the way that he lived versus the way that he died. And that's what took on my mission. And so it's been an amazing and hard road, and I'm still in it. But I work every day to keep his name alive, to keep his memory alive, to keep what he was about alive. And that's what gets me through the day. That's my mission. That's my purpose. And so that's where I wanted to be.
And so what is this legacy?
So Grief to Hope was born. So I knew when all this happened that I wanted to do something, and I didn't know exactly what that was. And I kept thinking, okay, God, I kept, asking God, and even though I was mad, he understood that I was mad, which I learned later. But so COVID hit in June of 2020. And I had volunteered, and I thought about writing a book and speaking and all that kind of thing. But then June of 2020, March 2020, COVID hit. And so in June of 2020, I was like, wait a minute, this is it. COVID not only put another level on death, and just imagine, because I struggled with Justin, but I couldn't imagine that another level of not being able to say goodbye, not being able to, those kind of things all, your grandpa, or you're dropping him off at the hospital, or you're not going to be able to see him, or no funerals, all those things that I cherished that I could have, people were not having. And so I said, I have to do something, and everything was on Zoom. My work was on Zoom. So then I was like, wait a minute, I can do a support group. We could meet on Zoom. And so I built this program. It's a 7-week program called Grief to Hope. We meet for 7 weeks, an hour each week. And the first week I sort of introduce, say my why, talk about basically what I do here, have people introduce themselves. And then weeks 2 through 5, we spell out the word grief. And we talk about gift of time. We talk about receive help. We talk about inspiration. We talk about expectations. We talk about feel everything. And we also have, if you have other topics you want to talk about, we can absolutely do that. And then the last session is called To Hope. And all this is about is finding that inspiration, that thing that gets you out of bed every morning, and relying on that to get you through the next day. And if it's a hard day, let it be a hard day, not a hard week, not a hard month. And so it's been an amazing experience. We start a new session in January. I've done 7 sessions so far. It's been incredible. I have all different types of grief. I shouldn't say types of grief. I should say varieties, because I don't like saying type. But there's people that have lost, their children, their spouses, to health, to suicide, just a million different ways. And we get together and we just talk. And the amazing thing about it is it's being around people that understand what you're going through, and we're not trying to fix anything. We're just listening. And sometimes we'll provide our advice if we've been in it. Like sometimes people have been there for 13 years and sometimes it's people's, third month. But we get together and it's just an amazing experience of just talking about it and letting people know, you're not doing it wrong. This grief thing is so individualized, like a snowflake, right? That when I first started grieving, Justin, and I think for the first few months you're in that fog, but when I first started grieving Justin, I thought I was doing it wrong because I was like, okay, I need to do this, I need to do this and this and this, and then it'll all go away, right? And if I keep doing that, if I keep crying, if I keep writing in a journal, it will go away. And that's not how it works. And so it's just opening that awareness, because when it's in your face and you're dealing with grief, you have no idea what to expect. And that's about the worst time to be surprised by anything.
Absolutely. Hope you are truly a shining star. The fact that you created this legacy, it's one thing to say, I'm going to keep Justin alive, but it's another thing to start something so key in his memory, in his honor, that you do to help others, hopefully at the same time helping yourself through it as well.
Absolutely.
That's what this podcast has been for me in a lot of ways. But your story is absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. I could sit and talk with you all afternoon, truly, 7 days a week, and listen to you. And there's so much inspiration and hope. Listeners can't see it, but your eyes smile when you talk about Justin and when you talk about this group that you have. Sadly, boy, this time has just flown by. It truly has. So before I start to wind down and say my goodbyes to everybody for the week, I want to turn the mic over to you, and I'd like you to tell people how they can sign up for your new group that's starting in January. Mention also your book, because I have a copy and I have started it. I am going to finish it. And now that I've spoken with you, I'm going to have your voice when I read the words, and I appreciate that. So it's your turn now, Hope. The mic is yours.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate it. So you can reach me at www.grief2hopesupport.com. That's grief2hopesupport.com. And on that page tells exactly about the new series that's starting, all about me. It's got a great picture of Justin and a bio of him. You can check out, and you can also reach me through there. You can sign up. I have a newsletter, but you can sign up and email me if you have any questions, concerns, thoughts about the program whatsoever. And on there is also a link to my book, which is called Grief to Hope. And it's just my memoir. So it's exactly what we talked about today, because I really feel telling my story and your story and all of our stories, someone needs to hear it. Whatever that story may be, somebody needs to hear it. And so if it's not my story, I would love to hear your story. So just that's the main purpose of Grief to Hope.
Sounds incredible. Almost too good to be true. So I encourage our listeners to visit grieftohopesupport.com and sign up for the group. Hope is an incredible being, and I think you will find a lot of strength in her, maybe to help you walk your path as well. I have to say farewell for today. I do it reluctantly. And again, I remind everybody to take care of yourselves. Grief is ugly. Today, you've heard some of the rawness, and it's raw for all of us in different ways. Don't despair. Hang on. Find stories like Hope's, like others, and hang on to them. Tomorrow's another day. Take care of yourself, and I hope you'll tune in again next week as we all continue to live and grieve.
Thank you so much for listening with us today. Do you have a topic that you'd like us to cover, or do you have a question from one of our episodes? Please email us at info@asiliveandgrieve.com and let us know. We hope you will find a moment to leave a review, send an email, and share with others. Join us next time as we continue to live and grieve together.